I was inspecting General Robert Alden's office when everything I believed about discipline, duty, and control collapsed in a heartbeat. The morning sunlight cut across his polished mahogany desk, glinting off medals and engraved brass nameplates. My hands, trained to keep every movement precise, trembled slightly as I adjusted my folder. That's when I saw it. A photograph, sitting perfectly framed, silver engraving along the edges. A boy no older than 6, with dark curls and piercing blue eyes, stared back at me. He held a small stuffed marine bear, gripping it with an intensity I suddenly recognized. And just like that, the world went quiet. I froze, unable to breathe. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The photograph seemed to pulse with memory. Every laugh, every scraped knee, every secret shared in the orphanage years ago. The boy's eyes, the ones I thought I had buried in my memory, were alive again. Something wrong, Major Collins? General Alden's voice cut through the silence. It was calm but precise, with the weight of authority behind every syllable. My throat tightened. Sir, that boy. I knew him. In the orphanage. The general stepped closer, and for the first time I saw a crack in his composure. His color drained and his lips trembled. You mean my missing son? I didn't know what to say. I was a Marine, trained to face chaos head-on, to suppress fear, to follow orders without hesitation. And yet here I was, staring at a photograph that turned my life inside out and forced me to confront a past I thought I had long buried. I first met Ethan at St. Mark's Orphanage in Waco, Texas, and from the very first moment, he became impossible to forget. I was 8, awkward, skinny, with more curiosity than sense, and he was 6, small, wiry, and impossibly fierce for his age. The orphanage itself was a place that smelled faintly of bleach and old wood, lined with worn cots and cracked floorboards that echoed, every footstep like a drumbeat. The walls were pale, indifferent, and the windows often streaked with rain or dust. Yet somehow, within those gray walls, Ethan and I found a world of our own. He had a grin that made the toughest staff member pause, a gleam in his eyes that suggested mischief, and a stubborn streak that could bend even the rules of the orphanage itself. On the first day, he had cornered me near the library, eyes wide, a crooked smile on his freckled face. You're going to be my brother, Liam, he said, as if the words themselves were a binding contract. I didn't know what to say, but something about the certainty in his voice made me nod. And just like that, our alliance was forged, unspoken yet unbreakable. Days turned into weeks, and we became inseparable. Every meal, every chore, every punishment somehow became an adventure because we faced it together. If the older boys tried to bully me, Ethan would appear from nowhere, a small shadow with a lion's courage, shouting at them with a confidence he barely understood. We carved secret paths behind the orphanage, climbed trees that seemed impossibly tall, and hid our stolen treasures in the crawl spaces beneath the dormitory floors. Each day was its own mission, each laugh its own victory. Nights were the hardest. The orphanage dormitory was silent, except for the occasional cough or whisper from a bed across the room. But I could hear Ethan breathing next to me, and that sound alone was enough to make the darkness bearable. On one such night, he leaned over and whispered, Liam, I want to be a soldier when I grow up. I'll protect people, just like you protect me. I remember the weight of that statement, the gravity behind the boy's small words. I squeezed his hand, nodded, and told him I'd always protect him. A promise, foolish perhaps, but sincere, made in the dark of a dormitory where no one else could hear, where the world outside didn't exist. Ethan wasn't just a companion. He became the measure of everything I thought I knew about courage, loyalty, and trust. He laughed at things that frightened everyone else, clung to me when he was scared, and taught me, in subtle ways, what it meant to care for someone beyond yourself. There was the scraped knee from climbing too high, the night he cried because a storm kept him awake, and the countless whispered conversations about futures that seemed impossibly bright for boys living in a place meant to dim their spirits. Each memory was a thread woven into the fabric of my youth, and for years I carried that thread quietly with me, invisible to the world, but burning like a quiet fire inside. And then came the day we were separated. I was 10, he was 8. A sudden notice, a paperwork error, a foster placement I couldn't influence. And just like that, he was gone. I remember the morning vividly, the sunlight spilling through the dormitory windows, his small face pressed to the glass, lips moving in silent goodbyes. He didn't cry, not openly. But I saw the storm behind his eyes, and I understood. I had failed to protect him then, though I didn't realize it. I walked away with my suitcase, my heart heavy, carrying a promise that would haunt me for decades. I had sworn to protect him, and the world had torn him from me. The orphanage faded from my life as I grew older, but Ethan never truly left. I carried fragments of him with me, the laugh, the stubborn grin, the small hands clinging to mine in the dark. He became a ghost in my mind, a reminder of something I had lost, and yet something I could never forget. Every memory was a whisper, every recollection a call I couldn't ignore, even if I tried. Before I continue, tell, from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. The day we were separated was the first day I truly understood what loss felt like. Ethan, my closest friend, my brother in every way that mattered, vanished from my life in the span of a few hours. I carried my small suitcase down the dusty roads of Waco, feeling the weight of absence in every step. At 10 years old, I had already learned that life could be cruel, indifferent, and unforgiving, and yet no training or discipline could have prepared me for the emptiness that followed. I was placed with a new foster family, strangers with a large house, polite smiles and rules that suffocated. My nights were haunted by dreams of Ethan, the way he would sneak cookies to me in the dead of night, the way he would whisper secret jokes that only we understood, the way his eyes sparkled with mischief and courage. Each dream ended the same way, him being pulled away, disappearing into the shadows of a world I couldn't reach. I woke drenched in sweat, heart racing, and a hollow ache lodged deep in my chest. School became a battlefield of its own. Other children had families, birthdays, traditions I could never claim. I buried myself in books, excelling in every subject I could, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Every achievement was a way to prove to the universe, and perhaps to myself, that I could survive, that I could rise above being a boy without a family. Yet no medal, no grade, no recognition could fill the void Ethan had left behind. By the time I was 15, I had learned to wear a mask, smile when expected, laugh when necessary, but never allow anyone to see the hollowness inside. I excelled in athletics, leadership roles, and academics, not for recognition, but because structure became my armor. Discipline, order, and preparation were the only things I could control, and I clung to them as tightly as I had once clung to Ethan's hand. When I joined the Marines at 18, that discipline transformed into something sharper, more exacting. The world demanded soldiers who could suppress fear, manage chaos, and act without hesitation. I became that soldier, one step ahead of doubt, one breath away from perfection. Every drill, every march, every mission was a reminder that control was everything. Yet beneath the uniform, beneath the posture and precision, I carried a secret, a small, stubborn ember of memory. A boy with curls and piercing blue eyes named Ethan, who had once trusted me to protect him. Years passed. Deployments came and went. I saw war, chaos, and destruction in places most people only read about. I learned to face death, to manage fear, and to confront challenges that would break most men. And yet, even in the midst of firefights and chaos, I would see him, Ethan, in flashes of memory, a laugh in the wind, a small hand reaching out, a mischievous grin in the darkness. Those moments reminded me that even the strongest soldier cannot outrun the past. I told no one about him, not a single word. It was too private, too fragile, too potent. To admit it would be weakness, and weakness was a luxury I could not afford. Still, every promotion, every commendation, every battle fought carried his shadow. I carried guilt, yes, for failing to protect him as a child. I carried hope, too, that he had survived, that he had grown strong. And I carried the quiet determination that, should fate ever allow, I would find him again. It was that quiet hope that guided me, long after my uniform was pressed, my boots polished and my record impeccable. Little did I know, that hope would collide violently with reality one morning at Fort Hood, when the past, present, and duty converged in a single photograph that would shatter everything I believed about my life, my discipline, and the world itself. The morning of the inspection started like any other. Fort Hood was quiet, almost deceptively so, the kind of silence that makes the hum of fluorescent lights seem deafening. I walked the corridors with measured steps, my uniform crisp, my boots echoing against the polished concrete. My folder was perfectly aligned in my hands, filled with checklists, reports, and evaluations. Every detail mattered. Every observation counted. Emotion was a liability. Precision was everything, and yet, as I entered General Alden's office, I felt it. The pull of something unexplainable. A tension in the air I couldn't place. The office was immaculate, the kind of space that demanded respect and inspired fear. The walls were lined with medals, commendations, and framed photographs. Nothing in that room was accidental. Every item was deliberate, a statement of power, discipline, and authority. Then I saw it. A photograph on the edge of his desk, silver-framed, gleaming in the morning light. At first I thought it was a child from some ceremonial event. But the moment I saw the face, the dark curls, the piercing blue eyes, the mischievous grin clutching a small marine bear, my blood froze. My pulse roared like a drum. The world tilted, and the room, with all its discipline and authority, faded into a blur. I froze mid-step, my folder slipping from my hands and scattering papers across the carpet. Every instinct I had, honed through years of training, screamed at me to maintain composure. Every memory I had of Ethan, my childhood friend, rose like a tidal wave, washing away years of carefully constructed armor. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook. My eyes refused to leave the photograph. "Something wrong, Major Collins?" General Alden's voice cut through the haze. It was precise, commanding, and yet there was a hint of curiosity, of concern, that belied his otherwise flawless composure. I swallowed hard, trying to form words. "Sir, that boy, I knew him, at the orphanage. The general's brow furrowed. His lips parted slightly, his posture rigid. Then slowly, the color drained from his face. His eyes widened as he stepped closer to the desk, as if the photograph had physically struck him. "You mean my missing son?" His voice was barely above a whisper, trembling not with fear, but with disbelief. I didn't know what to say. I was trained to confront chaos, not heartbreak. I was trained to issue orders and respond to emergencies, not to face a moment that threatened to dismantle my entire understanding of life, loyalty, and fate. And yet, standing there, I felt the weight of decades pressing down on me, decades of separation, longing, guilt, and unanswered questions. I drew in a shuddering breath, trying to steady myself. "Sir, the boy in this photo—" Ethan, that was his name. "We grew up together at St. Mark's Orphanage in Waco. He was my closest friend." I promised I'd protect him." Alden's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening against the edge of his desk. Silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. Then he said it, the words I never expected to hear, taken from a park in Dallas. 20 years ago. 4 years old, my son, missing all these years. It didn't make sense. And yet, every detail I remembered aligned perfectly with what he said. Every memory, every laugh, every secret we shared at the orphanage became undeniable evidence. My mind raced, attempting to reconcile two realities: the boy I had grown up with, and the powerful general whose child had vanished decades ago. The room seemed to constrict around us. Papers rustled under my hands. Medals glinted like silent witnesses, and the air between us was electric with revelation. Alden's eyes, once unflinching and commanding, now reflected fear, hope, and disbelief all at once. And I, Liam Collins, Marine Major, disciplined soldier, stood in the eye of a storm I had never anticipated, where duty, memory, and destiny collided in a single photograph. For the first time in years, I realized that some pasts refuse to remain buried. Some promises, even unspoken, demand to be fulfilled. And the moment had arrived. The boy I had promised to protect was alive. And the truth, the unbearable, dangerous, impossible truth, was now staring back at us from a silver frame. The room felt impossibly small. General Alden's office, which had always exuded control, discipline, and order, suddenly became a place of fragile uncertainty. Papers, medals, and commendations glinted under the morning sun. But all I could see was the photograph of Ethan, the boy I had grown up with. Now undeniably the general's long-lost son. My heart thundered, my training threatening to fail me, as I realized that the past and present had collided in a way that would forever alter both our lives. The general stood rigid, hands gripping the edge of his desk, eyes flicking from me to the photograph as if searching for confirmation. Silence stretched between us, thick with tension and disbelief. He finally exhaled sharply, his voice barely steady. "Liam, tell me everything. How can this be possible?" I took a deep breath. forcing the memories I had kept buried for decades to the surface. Sir, Ethan and I grew up together in St. Mark's Orphanage in Waco. He came there when he was 6. We were inseparable. Every scraped knee, every stolen apple, every whispered promise. We shared it all. And I promised him I'd protect him. I never knew you were his father until now. Alden's face tightened, his jaw working as though he were physically restraining himself. He was taken from a park in Dallas when he was 4. He vanished without a trace. His voice faltered. Years of fear, guilt, and unanswered questions weighed on him, revealing a vulnerability he had hidden beneath decades of authority. The most commanding officer I had ever seen was suddenly just a man, haunted and human, staring at a photograph that had been a ghost in his life for 20 years. Could feel the tension in the air, the weight of history pressing down on both of us. Memories of Ethan as a child came rushing back, unbidden and vivid. The way he would climb trees far too high, his fearless grin after a mischievous stunt, the nights when he whispered secrets in the dark. And with every recollection, the urgency of the moment intensified. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a reckoning, a collision of decades-long absence and the unbearable reality of what had been lost. Someone must have hidden him, Alden whispered, more to himself than to me. His eyes darted around the office as if the very walls might betray the truth. I trusted people, officials, foster workers. No one ever told me he survived. How could this have happened under my command? His hands clenched, shaking with a mixture of rage, despair, and disbelief. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Sir, it wasn't just fate. It was deliberate. Someone erased him from the records, changed his name, covered the trail. But I remember everything. The boy I knew, the promises I made, the places we hid, the people who knew us. We can trace him. We can find the truth. Alden's breathing grew rapid, his posture tense, as if decades of rigid discipline were unraveling in an instant. The photograph remained in his hands, Ethan's gaze catching the light in a way that made the room feel almost sacred. If what you're saying is true, Liam, then everything I believed, everything I built my life around, it was all lies. His voice cracked. The first time I had ever heard such vulnerability from a man of his reputation. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Sir, it's not too late. We can uncover the truth, but we have to act carefully. Whoever did this, they were careful for a reason. This is bigger than just the orphanage. It's deeper and dangerous. For the first time, Alden's authoritative demeanor broke entirely. He sank into his chair, eyes fixed on the photograph, and muttered under his breath, I failed him. I failed my son, and in that moment, I realized that duty, loyalty, and honor were no longer abstract concepts. They were alive, demanding action, and entwined with every memory of a boy who had been lost to the world but never truly lost to me. The revelation was not just shocking, it was a call to arms. And I, Liam Collins, knew I would follow that call, wherever it led, to uncover the truth and bring Ethan home. The days that followed were a blur of records, phone calls, and quiet, meticulous investigation. Fort Hood's offices, usually filled with the rhythm of drills, paperwork, and routine inspections, became a map of mysteries to unravel. Every file I touched, every ledger I reviewed, felt like a step closer to Ethan, or a step into a trap left by someone careful, enough to erase him from existence. The weight of decades pressed down on me, and the stakes became terrifyingly clear. This was no simple case of lost records. Someone had deliberately hidden him, and their reach was long. I began at the orphanage, retracing the steps that had once been a playground of laughter and shared secrets. The building had changed, walls repainted, floors replaced, memories fading into the echoes of forgotten footsteps. But I remembered every detail, the crawl spaces where Ethan had stashed our treasures, the quiet corners where we whispered dreams too big for our age, the swing set in the backyard where he had once promised he'd always protect me. These memories were more than nostalgia. They were breadcrumbs, guiding me through layers of bureaucratic fog. Every inquiry I made, however, revealed walls of silence. Former staff members had moved on or refused to speak. Records were incomplete or lost. It became evident that the erasure had been intentional. Whoever had orchestrated this had done so with precision, understanding both the system and the people who trusted it blindly. Yet even in the face of obstruction, I pressed on. I had to. The boy who had trusted me once, who had counted on me as a brother, was somewhere out there, and no amount of bureaucracy or fear would stop me from finding him. I worked alongside General Alden, whose reputation as a meticulous, unyielding officer now took on a new dimension. He pored over documents, cross-referenced names, dates, and foster placements, and for the first time I saw him vulnerable, desperate, and human. His authority, which had once inspired awe and fear, now guided our search with single-minded determination. Every lead he followed, every record he opened, was another chance to piece together the boy who had been stolen. From him decades ago, we uncovered small but significant fragments. A former foster family recalled a boy with sharp, inquisitive eyes who had lived with them briefly, though they had called him by another name. A retired staff member remembered a little boy who had vanished suddenly, taken from the orphanage without explanation. Each fragment, seemingly inconsequential at the time, began to form a mosaic, a picture of the deliberate erasure of Ethan from the world he once knew. Every night I lay awake in my quarters, memories of our childhood flashing behind closed eyes. I remembered the way he used to hide his favorite toy, a small, worn marine bear, under his pillow. I remembered how he would climb the tallest tree in the yard, daring me to follow. I remembered the nights he whispered secrets in the darkness, telling me things that made my 10-year-old mind believe in courage, loyalty, and hope. These memories were not just recollections. They were clues guiding me toward the boy, who had become more than a friend. He was a part of my soul. As our search intensified, so did the danger. Whoever had orchestrated Ethan's disappearance likely had reasons to keep him hidden, and I was painfully aware that uncovering the truth could provoke retaliation. Yet the thought of leaving him lost again, of letting bureaucracy and fear dictate his life, was unbearable. I had carried the weight of our separation for 20 years, and I would carry it no longer. Step by step, file by file, memory by memory, we began to close in. Every lead brought us closer, every recollection sharper, until the trail of silence and deceit began to unravel. The closer we came, the clearer it became. Ethan had survived. Someone had kept him from the father who loved him, from the friend who had promised to protect him, but they had not been clever enough to hide the truth forever. And in that realization, a new resolve took root. This search was no longer about paperwork or inspection reports. It was about reclaiming a life stolen, reuniting a family fractured by deceit, and fulfilling a promise made decades ago in the quiet corners of an orphanage dormitory. I, Liam Collins, soldier and friend, would see it through to the end. No obstacle, no bureaucracy, and no fear would stop me from finding Ethan and bringing him home. The trail of whispers, half-truths, and erased records eventually led us to someone who had been present at the orphanage the day Ethan disappeared. An elderly former staff member, hunched over and wary, answered the door as though we were ghosts come to demand payment for sins long buried. Her eyes widened when she saw General Alden and me standing there, a Marine major and the father of the boy she had once helped hide. There was a moment, a heartbeat, where silence stretched, heavy with fear and guilt, before words stumbled out of her trembling mouth. I don't know why. It wasn't my choice. We were told, she whispered, shaking, her frail hands twisting the hem of her skirt. The weight of decades hung in her confession. Every detail, every name she reluctantly provided, was a thread unraveling a tapestry of deception, deliberate erasure, and secrets meant to remain buried. I listened carefully, noting each hesitation, each slip of memory, knowing that the truth had been carefully hidden but never completely erased. Alden's posture was rigid, every muscle coiled like a spring. The man who had commanded armies now trembled with personal fury, rage flashing in his eyes, his authority cracking under the weight of betrayal and loss. "Who told you to hide him?" he demanded, voice shaking yet sharp. The staff member flinched at the intensity, muttering names and vague references to officials long gone, documents shredded and orders that should never have existed. Realized then just how deep the conspiracy went. This was not the negligence of a careless orphanage. It was intentional, systematic, and cruel. Someone had stolen a child from his father, a general with influence not out of malice for him, but for reasons buried in greed, politics, and power. Every carefully hidden trail, every altered record, now began to make sense in the context of human deceit and ambition. For hours, we reconstructed the past piece by piece. I took the lead, cross-referencing memories with what she said, carefully probing for consistency, watching for lies or hesitation. Each revelation made the picture clearer. Ethan had been hidden under a different name, shuffled from foster placement to foster placement, shielded from the world, and kept from the father who had loved him. Fiercely, the tension in the room was electric. Alden's hands trembled, his usual composure gone, replaced with the raw anguish of a father who had been robbed of his child. And I, Liam Collins, Marine, lifelong soldier, and once a boy sworn to protect. Ethan felt the weight of every promise I had made decades ago tighten around my chest. This confrontation was more than uncovering records. It was demanding accountability from those who thought they could erase a child, a family, a promise, with bureaucratic papers and silence. Finally, the staff member broke down completely, revealing the last crucial detail, the location where Ethan had spent his final years before being placed elsewhere. It was precise, specific, and terrifyingly close to where he might be right now, isolated and wary of anyone reaching him. The room felt like it was holding its breath, as if the world itself waited for the next step. Alden's face hardened, determination replacing the initial despair. "We find him. Tonight, if we must. I will not lose him again," he said, voice firm, iron-laced with decades of pent-up authority and desperation. I nodded, understanding perfectly. The boy we were looking for, the boy I had grown up with, who had survived against odds we could scarcely comprehend, was within reach, and we would stop at nothing to reclaim him. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of discipline and strategy settle over me. Years of military training had prepared me for battle, for chaos, for the impossible, but nothing had prepared me for the battle of reclaiming a life stolen by lies, bureaucracy, and fear. This confrontation was not with guns or orders. It was with time itself, and we were ready to win, step by step. We made our plan carefully, deliberately, with every detail accounted for. The past, present, and future were converging, and when we finally reached Ethan, nothing would be left unchanged. This confrontation was the turning point, the moment where decades of loss, memory, and promises collided, and where the boy, now nearly a man, would finally face the truth of who had loved him all along. The moment we arrived at the location, my heart raced in a way that no battlefield drill or combat mission had ever managed. Years of searching, years of silence, years of unanswered questions, all of it had led to this precise point. Alden, the general whose authority had once inspired armies, now moved with the single-minded desperation of a father on a mission to reclaim the son stolen from him decades ago. And I, Liam Collins, Marine friend, protector, felt the weight of every promise I had made to a boy who had trusted me as a brother. The house was quiet, deceptively so, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring and your nerves stretch taut. I remembered every detail Ethan had once shared with me, his habits, his routines, the small ways he moved through the world that made him unmistakably himself. And yet, seeing him now, older, wary, almost a stranger in his own skin, I realized just how much time had changed him. He was stronger, taller, careful, eyes scanning for danger where there might be none, yet still unmistakably the boy I had grown up with. When Ethan saw us, there was a flicker of recognition, hesitation first, disbelief, then something buried deep inside, memory, trust, and love. His eyes met mine, and I felt it immediately. The boy who had laughed at scraped knees, who had whispered secrets in the dormitory, who had clung to my hand in the dark, was still there, still alive, still a part of me. "Liam?" he whispered, voice uncertain. "Breath-catching." "Yes," I said, stepping forward carefully, letting the years of distance and pain melt into the space between us. "It's me." "It's really me," Alden followed, his presence heavy yet trembling with restrained emotion. "Ethan," he said, voice raw, almost breaking. I am your father." I never stopped looking. "I never," he choked, tears forming at the corners of his eyes, decades of absence and helplessness weighing down his words. Ethan froze, eyes darting between us, taking in the impossible reality. And then slowly, the walls he had built for years began to crumble. He stepped forward, and the first touch, an embrace neither time nor distance could erase, happened. Years of longing, guilt, fear, and loss poured out into that embrace, a torrent of emotion neither of us could contain. I could feel his pulse, his breath, his fear, and his relief all at once. I had promised to protect him, and now, finally, I could. The reunion was quiet at first, but the silence was profound. Words were unnecessary. The connection forged in childhood, tempered by years apart, spoke louder than anything else. Alden joined us, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder, tears spilling freely. "I failed you once," he said, voice trembling, "but I will never fail you again." Ethan's eyes glistened, and for the first time I saw him allow himself to be a son, vulnerable yet safe. We spent hours talking, slowly, carefully, rebuilding what had been lost. Ethan shared pieces of his life, years of confusion, of wondering why no one came, of fleeting moments of hope. I shared memories of the orphanage, of the promises we had made, of a brotherhood that had survived time and distance. Alden listened, admitted his failures, and vowed to make up for every lost moment. As night fell, a quiet peace settled over us. The past was not erased, the pain not forgotten, but something greater had emerged: connection, reconciliation, and the knowledge that some bonds, no matter the obstacles, endure. Ethan, the boy who had survived against odds that would have broken most, now stood with his father and his lifelong friend, surrounded by the proof that love and loyalty could not be stolen, only delayed. Liam Collins felt the promise I had made all those years ago finally fulfilled. The boy I had sworn to protect, the friend I had carried in memory through decades of war and loss, was safe. And in that safety, in that fragile, hard-won peace, we all found something we had been searching for: home, family, and the unwavering certainty that some bonds, once forged, are eternal. The world outside continued as it always had, rigid, unforgiving, and indifferent. But within that room, surrounded by what had been lost and what had been reclaimed, time itself seemed to pause. The past had finally met the present, and the future, uncertain, hopeful, and unbroken, lay ahead. We had survived lies, separation, and deceit. We had survived bureaucracy, fear, and the passage of decades. And in the end, we had survived each other. That, I realized, was enough.